So coming up here, it's a lot. We have to go upstairs. It's like a big workout. But being here and hearing this story, everywhere we go, we hear stories, and they all seem very shocking. This one's a little more gruesome than most, but it's almost as if I'm losing the shock factor because these stories become so almost ordinary because so many people did so many amazing things that it comes down to the spirit of the Long March. And I feel like I feel it everywhere, and I see it in so many different of these areas. So it's really amazing. I think that it's a really smart move. I mean, coming here and learning so much about all of the military strategy and just how important it was. And West Point is one of the top military academies in the entire world. So for them to, you know, make this a case study and delve into it deeper is really smart because, you know, this is one of the more recent revolutions, you know, and we have a lot to learn from it. Yeah, so I think it's amazing. I think it's really smart, really smart.
Yeah.
And also, like, Chairman Mao was so poetic, you know, like he often put out stuff to boost morale to the people, for the soldiers, to make sure that they were, you know, motivated to win the war. And that was really important to him. And I think the U.S. has less of that. And our military leaders aren't often putting out poetry.
What about George Washington?
Yeah, I mean, you know, that is someone who did. That is someone who was sort of forming a country in the same way that Mao was. And so he was more poetic about it and more passionate about it. But that sort of dies in those earlier ages in the U.S. and it's become very strategy, you know, and I feel like what helps this Long March become successful is just how connected they were with the people, which I feel like is less. I mean, we hear about what happens in war, but we're pretty detached from war, unless it's our brother or son or is in the war. Like a lot of us don't know very many people that are even in the army, you know, but I feel like this was an army that picked up soldiers in every village that they went to, you know, so it was really connected with the people. So that's something I feel like that would be important in the case study for all of these academies all over the U.S. So the first thing I noticed were the chains, but they had added like wood panels now to sort of make it authentic to what they sort of had to do, but obviously not as hard. But you can see underneath the wood planks that there's just a few of the chains left, and I sort of was trying to figure out how on earth it was possible for them to do this, because they had machine guns firing at them. They had to lay each plank while carrying each plank across so that they could make it across while they're like throwing grenades, and it's just like chaos. But it's such an interesting story that I really enjoyed being here. The water, you can hear it, it's so loud. It's like the river moves really quickly, so I know that if anything were to happen and it were to fall, like I don't know if it would probably be a wrap for me, but epic story. I really enjoyed today. So being out here in the grasslands is one of the most beautiful spots that we've been here in China, but coming across and learning the history of the area was probably the most sad. So it was sort of a flip of a coin. It was really interesting, but learning the story, I woke up very early and I've been to maybe 5 monuments today, just going through the journey that they had in this area and hearing this story about how, you know, so many people were being left behind just because they were falling back because they were so hungry and they were freezing, not because it was purposely left behind, but just because how treacherous this journey was and how, you know, some of the leaders went back to try to find some of the people that were missing, and they come across men that were just, you know, resting and so close to death and starving and freezing. Like, it's horrific. And to think that these men were our age and younger it's interesting, because I don't think I've been faced with this sort of like traumatic experience before. So learning that, you know, a lot of these men weren't even able to fight because they didn't even make it that far. And I can only take the stories that I've learned and take them back to the US and share them, just so, you know, these men did not die in vain. You know, their story will go on. So we are here at one of the last battles on the Long March, and it was victory for the Red Army. And the circumstances of this battle were a little bit interesting, just because of the natural setting that it was in. The mountains are very close to each other, and because of that, there was only one way in, and they couldn't go back. These are grasslands. You know, they had troops chasing them, and it was like such a terrible time there. They had no choice but to move forward. And so instead of like giving up, they were so desperate that they started to think, you know, differently. Started to try to come up with different strategies to get through. And so what the strategy was is that they were going to send a few of their best climbing troops to the side of the mountain to, you know, hit the Going Dawn from the front. And so it was, you know, brilliant. Exhausted, but I'm so grateful to be here and learning, you know, each step of the way, the little stories and the little quirks about the different provinces and the different temperatures and the weather and the changes in the people and the culture are the things that I will hold dearest to me for the longest. But as far as, you know, what the Red Army had to go through in all of these places, I had no idea. You know, I read and studied before I got here, but, you know, first-hand stories from people whose parents were alive then, or who were alive then. We've met some people who were alive during the Red Army March. So we sort of now know. I feel like I know, and I have so much respect for the Red Army and what happened here, and how dedicated they were to the new China, because like I have never seen or experienced anything like it, and so I sort of understand why a lot of the military academies take a lot of these battles into consideration, because the spirit of this march is undeniable. Like, you can't study this march without understanding the spirit of the march, and that's sort of what I find most interesting about it. The amount of help that they got in each of the places that they visited. They wouldn't have made it without the people. And that's what the sort of army was about, you know, the peasants and farmers, you know, Red Army. So that's really what it was. And we've seen it depicted in, you know, face-to-face with people, in art, in museums, stories, books. It's everywhere. So you can't escape it. I can't believe it lasted for them for over a year, because it's only been about 43 days for us. But you know, I wouldn't change this experience for anything, and I can only, you know, take what I've learned back home and share the culture of China, and I hope to come back and visit some of these places again. I find myself, since it is coming to an end, taking even more time to take every single detail in, because I know that I'm leaving so soon, but I'm hoping to come back, so fingers crossed.